Okay, in this video we will discuss 6 Jews who studied Jubilees. Number 1. The number 1 is the Essenes. This Jewish sect lived in the Dead Sea area, and they lived in around 150 BCE until around 100 CE in that area by the Dead Sea. They were known as an ascetic group. They were very into staying pure, and they didn't have women there. They studied a lot of ancient texts and copied them by hand. They lived a communal life, and they were sort of like monks in their time. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were found as a result of all the work that they had done. Apparently they hid some scrolls in different caves when they were about to be attacked by the Romans. And so eventually in around the 1950s, these scrolls were discovered. And among these scrolls, we find fragments from 15 different copies of the Book of Jubilees, which means that it's one of the most prevalent texts among that collection. And so the Essenes are number 1 here. It's the source of the oldest texts that we have. Until the 1950s, the oldest we had was around the Middle Ages, and people believed, the scholars and the intellectuals, the academics, believed that Jubilees originated in the Middle Ages, and it's only a couple decades ago, like a century ago, that less than a century ago, that we found these texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and now everyone's like, oh yeah, it comes from the that time period. It's from that time period. But I want to point out that 15 copies are found, so it's a text that's already known and that's already being copied. It doesn't necessarily originate from that time period, and personally, from the work I've done, I don't believe that it does originate from that time period. But that's the first example we have of Jews who were studying Jubilees. So those are the Essenes. Number 2. Number 2 is Josephus. Josephus was a very famous historian who lived in around the 1st century, and it's from him that we have accounts about things like the destruction of the temple and the battle at Masada, and so many epic stories. That's from Josephus. He also used stories from Jubilees in his writings, and so it's clear from his writings that he was very familiar with Jubilees and considered it reputable and used it as a source that he trusted. So that is number 2. Number 3, the Jewish Ethiopians. They are often known as the Beta Israel, and they usually came from the tribe of Dan most often. Around the time of one of the temple periods, a group of these Danites went down to Ethiopia and began to live there. They had their own kingdom down there in Ethiopia, and they joined together with the other children of Shem because Ethiopia is part of the plot of Shem, as we see in Jubilees chapters 8 and 9. And so because that eastern horn of Africa belonged to the children of Shem, naturally children of Shem would have gone there to make sure that they held on to that piece of land. And so when the Danites went down there, they probably gathered together with their Shemite cousins, and there we have the Jewish Ethiopians. Before the 6th century, we know that they already had a copy of Jubilees in Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopic sacred language, and that they studied it and copied it by hand and held it to be sacred. The best preserved copies we have of Jubilees are from the Ge'ez and are from the Ethiopians. And so the Jewish Ethiopians definitely make the list, and they are number 3. Number 4, here we have from the year 900. The year 900, we have Saadya Gaon. Saadya Gaon was a famous rabbi. He was originally from Egypt. He went and studied in Tiberias in northern Israel. And then went to Babylon and opened a school there. His school studied the Book of Jubilees, and we know that they had a copy of the Hebrew Jubilees from a book from Frankfurt in 1876 called Perush LeDivrei Hayamim Miyuchas LeTalmid Rasag, that Kaplan, who we're going to talk about later, references. So we know that Saadya Gaon and his school of thought in Babylon had a Hebrew copy of Jubilees, and that's the last time we know about a Hebrew copy existing. Number 5 is Shlomo Rubin. Solomon, or Shlomo Rubin, lived in Vienna, and in 1870 he translated Jubilees into Hebrew. So apparently he had a German copy because he spoke German, and this German copy had been translated by Dillman in 1850 from the Gez, the Ethiopic. So Shlomo Rubin uses this German copy, and in 1870 he produces the Hebrew copy that we have till today of Jubilees. So it's quite a bit removed, but it's called Bereshit Zutrata, the Little Genesis, Mini Genesis. And he publishes that in 1870 in Vienna, which was at that time, he was in Galicia, so Poland and Ukraine, but he published in Vienna, which is Austria. Okay, and then we get to the most modern, and that is number 6, and that is Rav Aryeh Kaplan. Rav Aryeh Kaplan passed in the 1980s when he also had his Living Torah published. He also published other tremendous works like a translation on Sefer Yetzirah and Bahir, all these ancient texts, and he wrote many books like about Jewish meditation and the spiritual meaning of things and the inner world, so a lot of Kabbalistic stuff. But he was a translator and a scholar, and he, in his Living Torah translation, cites the Book of Jubilees 55 times. And he considered it a type of Midrash on par with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. He gave a list of 5 different Midrash books that all pull from Jubilees and calls it the oldest source for many of the material in those books of commentary and allegorical stories surrounding the biblical stories called Midrash. All right, those are our 6 famous Jewish people and groups that studied the Book of Jubilees, and now we see a overarching connection between the Jews throughout history who have studied this text. And, you know, though it was not considered part of the biblical canon, we can talk about another time why that might have been. But it's important to note that Jews have been studying the Book of Jubilees, grappling with it and translating it, but not as much as I think it should be. I think there should be a lot more grappling with the Book of Jubilees because it's so awesome, and that's why I did the work to translate into modern English, because the Old English was unbearable to me. And so I hope you will check out the Modern English translation, hardcover, including lots of notes, citations, and commentaries, and paperback ebook without those commentaries, so that it's a cleaner, more focused read for those who prefer that. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. This is Modern Jubilees.